Each Guardian wants something, greater speed, a rare weapon, a secret. Learn what it is, use it, Lysander. According to the Hidden, in the wilderness beyond the city, Lysander rallies his supporters and plots his return. Some whisper of sympathizers in the tower, and hidden gifts for Guardians who honor him. What's going on, ladies and gents, boys and girls, Guardians of all ages? Joker back again, once again, and some of you might be wondering, who's Lysander? And what does he have to do with faction rallies? Because that's what we're talking about today, ladies and gents, boys and girls, Guardians of all ages, faction rallies. So, sit back, get comfortable, grab a drink, maybe some popcorn, as I recite the not-so-long story of Bannerfall. You know, the PvP map. See, before Destiny 2 came along and fucking vandalized Bannerfall with Red Legion shit, it once flew the flag of New Monarchy. The Bannerfall lore tab reads, Bannerfall, Arena Designation, Bannerfall. Location, the last city, Earth. In the Concordat marked the most recent example of a city political faction rising in opposition to the consensus. This site marks a legendary battle where New Monarchy's Guardians rose to deliver the final blow to the Concordat. Unraveling the war efforts Lysander sought to bring against the Vanguard, Lord Shaxx has commandeered the area not only to commemorate the last stand, but as a reminder of the city's solidarity against those who seek to undermine the extreme efforts and sacrifice we make together to keep our peace. During Rise of Iron, there was a sparrow added called Lysander's Cry. Lysander's Cry was a legendary sparrow released during the 2016 Dawning and SRL event. This sparrow was hidden behind a mini-quest. First, you would go to Bannerfall, find a dead ghost, then go back to the tower. Hidden in a back room by future war cult, there was a present that when you opened it, it would grant you the Lysander's Cry sparrow. The placing of this sparrow is rather interesting and a great attention to detail, because the future war cult took the Concordat's place after the Concordat was destroyed. The flavor text on the Lysander's Cry sparrow reads, You've recreated the fall of the Concordat, and something answered. You take that on top of the Grimoire card that was added that I read at the beginning of the video, and you're like, aw shit, new faction, we're gonna have some faction wars. But then, that was it. That was the end of the story. This plotline has been completely and utterly forgotten. There hasn't even been any mention of Lysander in Destiny 2. Recently, Bungie took to the forums and polled the community. They asked, what would we like to see done with factions? I don't know. Perhaps maybe, just maybe, we could get a DLC exploring the return of the Concordat. Two of the factions have quite the history with the Concordat. New Monarchy was the sword that exiled them from the city, and the future war cult was brought in to take their place. Lysander literally fought a bloody coup to try to overthrow the Speaker and the Consensus. Currently within the Consensus, the Vanguard are the de facto ruling body of the city. And according to the Stolen Intelligence lorebook, both Ikora and Zavala are giving some serious thought to stepping down. If Lysander was ever going to do anything, there would be no better time than now. I mean, think about it. The Speaker's dead, and there has been no replacement. Osiris, whose responsibility it should have been to take up the mantle of the Speaker, just didn't do it. The Hunter Vanguard is dead, and if they went along with the Hunter Vanguard Dare to its logical conclusion and followed the chain of culpability, they would actually have to elect a Hive God as the next Hunter Vanguard. Huh, that'd be kind of funny. And, just to spit in the Vanguard's face, a lot of the hunters that should take up this duty left the city. The Vanguard, in and of itself, acting as a political body and a military body, is strained beyond belief with only 2 heads. If Lysander was ever going to make a move against the city, now would be the best and only time to do it. And there's a lot of things that could be done with this premise. Lysander coming back when the city's politically at its weakest. For example, you could set Lysander or a representative of Lysander up in the EDZ and offer a 4th faction. You can have some huge storyline where we interfere with some scheme of his ending in a raid. Maybe we have to beat him to a goal. Kind of like in Black Armory where we had to beat the Fallen to the Black Armory. Or whatever. You could bring the factions back as a joint coalition against Lysander and the Concordat and open up quests and rewards. Hell, you could easily do this over a season. You would start with a normal faction rally and just let it play out, and then at the end of the faction rally, when the winner is announced, people load into their game to see the tower decorated as their faction, but the winner's flags aren't there. No. Instead, what you see when you load into the tower is the Concordat's flags, signaling the return of Lysander and the Concordat. And this starts an entirely new quest line where you have to investigate what happened, why is the Concordat returning, and each faction, including the Vanguard, come together to deal with this problem. I'm just spitballing here, I'm one dude, and I think I've come up with a fairly decent premise to bring back factions. Like I said, given the death of the Speaker, given the death of the Hunter Vanguard, given the waning political power of the Vanguard and the Consensus, Lysander and the Concordat coming back right now would make the most sense. And it really does surprise me that Bungie hasn't done this yet. I mean, there's your story. The Concordat comes back, factions need to band together. There's your factions being relevant for at least a season, but perhaps expecting a season of the factions is too much of a pie-in-the-sky idea. Right up there with Season of Trials or Season of Osiris, where we bring back the Trials of Osiris. And I do mean Trials of Osiris, not Trials of the Nine. Please and thank you. I think this is also right up there with Jade Rabbit getting a Fate of All Fools skin, especially now that we know that skins are actually models and models affect how weapons work. But I digress. So what could we do that is easy? What could we do that is just the bare minimum? What isn't a pie-in-the-sky idea? Well, the easiest thing to do is they could do what they did in Destiny 1. They could just treat them as vendors. Take their current inventories, upgrade them to Year 3, and allow you to use tokens to buy their weapons and armor with random rolls. I think that is the bare minimum. I'm fairly certain that would be pretty easy mode. If Bungie wanted to go a little above and beyond the Call of Duty, not only could they treat factions like they were in Destiny 1, just another vendor, they could bring back some of the armor and weapons these factions had in Destiny 1. By the end of Destiny 1, these factions had pretty large inventories. More so if you decide to pull from their Year 1 inventory, which was not carried into Year 2 or 3. So you could get legacy weapons for each faction, like New Monarchy's Red Hand 9 or Crusader 1, or Dead Orbit's Hitchhiker FR4 or Hung Jury, or FWC's Wormwood Sidearm or the Waltz Pulse Rifle. All these were really great weapons. You could bring forward these weapons and armor and make them legacy gear, put really cool lore tabs on them, hell, give each faction a lore book, but most importantly, bring back faction loyalty exotic class items. These things were fucking sick. And I don't even think that this is one of those things where you have to worry about changing them at all. Just bring back the ones from Destiny 1, because you got it right the first time. They all look really cool. Make them legacy items, slap a lore tab on them, hell, tie them to a quest. Hell, tie all the legacy gear to a quest that brings you more and more into the inner circle of your selected faction. Oh, and hey, once you complete all the steps of the quest, you can get a really cool title for your character. You can be like Executor or Monarch for New Monarchy. You can be like a Roc or Edgelord for Dead Orbit. And I think they would actually need to make something up for Future War Cult because a title isn't coming off the top of my head. And if you do this quest for all 3 factions, you can get a title called I Am the Consensus. Now, sure, I'd love to see all new stuff, but again, we're talking bare minimums here. What could they do in maybe a month or 2? That said, I do think there is a huge difference between reskinning something because you need to make a weapons and armor quota and doing it because there's history behind it. Like, people want to bitch about the Thorn and the Last Word being brought back, but those stories are so important to the lore of Destiny that you really can't have the world of Destiny without them. Another good example are the Callus weapons and armor from the Menagerie. They were weapons and armor brought back from Destiny 1 and kitted out to Callus's taste. They all have a story. And I think in some weird way, Callus is trying to give us back a piece of something that we lost, like, look what I have returned to you, am I not benevolent? With the factions, if the lore and storytelling present it properly, which I know is asking a lot sometimes, these weapons and armor could or should be treated as relics of a great order. I think the issue with the original faction rally is it boils down to a popularity contest. Who had the best shaders? Who had the best looking ornaments? Who had the best faction weapons? And this is before we get into Bungie basically doing everything within their power to make lost sectors relevant. That's not to say that the contest element should go away entirely, but perhaps it should be recontextualized. Players shouldn't be punished, and yes, not being able to buy your faction's weapon is a punishment because they picked the wrong faction in a popularity contest. But the winning faction should still be rewarded. Now, it's always going to be a popularity contest, there's no avoiding that. And unfortunately, you can't do 3v3v3 Crucible matchmaking and have factions battle it out for their faction in Crucible. The reason you can't do that is because you're never going to have an equal number of players and an equal number of factions divided equally to where this makes any sense whatsoever. So in lieu of that, I think the smartest reward to give the winning faction, given that we have random rolls in the game, would be to give the players of that faction a steep discount on tokens or materials turned in towards buying packages from that faction. And this kind of makes sense. If your faction won, that means your faction got a ton of resources during the faction rally, so they can offer this discount. If your faction didn't win, well, that means they didn't get enough resources, which means they can't offer this discount. The way that I imagine this is factions would become a permanent fixture like in Destiny 1. You pledge to them, and then you stay with them for a week or two before you can change. You have your faction rally, like normal, but during Victory Week, you have this discount. And during Victory Week, you cannot change your faction. On top of that, one of the overall changes that I would make to factions is they don't just take faction tokens, but all planetary resources. So, like I said, during Victory Week, you would have this 50% discount on faction packages. So, say I really want a god roll of this new Monarchy Pulse Rifle. Well, now I have this discount, which doubles my odds. And essentially, I'm being rewarded with better odds to get what I want, but people aren't being punished by not being able to have access to certain weapons or gear simply because their faction lost. And like with the earlier example, I would still want to see faction pinnacle weapons. And pinnacle armor and gear and exotic class items. Tie these to a quest and let people get them that way. And once people get them, if they maybe don't like the roll, these weapons will be in the loot pool so they can chase after their god roll. And lore, give us more faction lore. Tie faction lore to these weapons and armor. Give us a faction lore book. Anyways, realistically, I think these are all relatively simple fixes and one large why haven't we had a season dedicated to factions fix. But, like always, ladies and gents, boys and girls, guardians of all ages, those are just my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. And like always, stay frosty.